Hi, good evening. Thank you for interviewing. I'm Kelsey Batt, the interviewee's proud daughter. Today is the 30th of September, 2019, and the purpose of this interview is to gain insight on my mom's lived experiences as an early woman at West Point Military Academy. Um, if I could have you state your first name and last name, please, for the transcript.
I am Erin Batt.
All right. So you're currently a middle school math teacher and mother of two, correct?
That's right.
To start us off, tell me a little bit about your life growing up and how you found yourself at West Point in 1982.
All right. Well, I am the baby of the family. I was a military brat, and my dad actually retired from the military when I was in early elementary school. So many of my early childhood experiences involved my dad being in the military. But interestingly enough, he was deployed to Vietnam, and I do remember I was about 5, and I remember Dad leaving, and I thought that was a normal thing. It never occurred to me where Dad was going. I guess I was too young to understand, or maybe my parents didn't tell me. But he left for a year, and then he came back, and I still remember the first time I saw him. It was weird because I'm going to digress a little bit. Many years later, when I was an adult, I was at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden I had this incredible flashback, like to being 5 years old, and this door opening, almost like an elevator door, and my dad coming out. And like the time, like I said, when I was 5, I had no idea. Dad just left for a year. That's just like that was my reality. All my friends' dads would leave for a year. It's just our turn. And then from there, he worked at kind of cushy jobs in Washington, D.C., where he wore more of the military, not really the fatigues or the camouflage type thing, but more like an office job kind of thing. So I never really, in my remembered him being happy. And then growing up, I remember my brother, this is going to sound like it's off topic, but my brother was in a drum and bugle corps. And so a lot of what we did every summer was travel to watch him perform at these different drum and bugle corps competitions. And one of the tours that they went on kind of went up the East Coast area towards New York. And so my dad was able to make some phone calls and be able to take my brother's drum and bugle corps to visit West Point. And so the kids stayed in the barracks, and of course I was young, and it turned out that was the first year that women were allowed there. And so it was kind of like I was just a kid, and they're like, oh my gosh, look at the women marching with the guys. And the thing that I remember was the new cadets this was in the summer, the new cadets were coming out of the mess hall, and it was funny because they were marching and singing cadence, which, I was kind of like, okay, and they were singing cadences, and then they were giving rifle commands, only all the new cadets had bananas. And so it was like, right shoulder, banana, and these kids would all put the banana up on their right shoulder. Present banana. And so this whole group of people was marching with the banana. So just little snippets of things throughout my childhood that I remember. And then, of course, my dad being an old grad, of course, is kind of like, wow, women in the military. He was like, women in the military, women at West Point. There were no women here. And I still kind of remember him being like, hey, wait a minute. And then like looking over at me and like the realization hitting that, none of his sons had followed in his footsteps, and here this baby of the family might be the one, and then so that was like his mission from there on to get his daughter to go to West Point. So I never thought I would do it, because like all through high school, he was kind of like, oh, I want you to go to West Point. You'd be great. You'd be great. And I was like, I'm not going. And then even when he, it was time to apply to colleges and everything, he was the one who actually wrote away and called up and got the admissions packet. And I was like, okay, Dad, whatever, I'll fill it out, but I'm not going to do this. And then somewhere along the line, I changed my mind and decided to do it. So there I was. I don't know if that answered all your questions. Else, I kind of go off on tangents. Sorry.
What other colleges were you considering at the time? And ultimately, why did you choose to settle on West Point?
Well, the ones that I remember applying to, and I think back in those days, we didn't apply to 5 or 10 schools like some kids do today. I remember applying to 3, Harvard, Princeton, and West Point, which is the United States Military Academy. I got offers of admission to some other colleges without even applying. I guess I had really good grades or SAT scores or something. So I got things in the mail all the time. I got scholarships to universities I hadn't even applied to. And I thought that was great. I was kind of proud of myself, but didn't really entertain any of those. So it was really the three that I was considering were Harvard and Princeton and West Point. And I think I almost went to Harvard. And then one day it finally occurred to me, I had applied to Harvard more for prestige, because it was a big name school. I had never visited campus. I don't really think we did that back in those days, because we applied to schools. It wasn't like now where kids have to go on all these national tours to visit their top schools and go to student admitted day and those kind of things. I never set foot on campus. It was just more pictures and brochures. We didn't have the internet. But it occurred to me all of a sudden, wait a minute, I'm planning to be an engineer, and I could study that at Harvard, but that's not what they're really known for. And so then at that point, I felt kind of dumb because, here I was, I got into Harvard, I was all, proud of that. And then I realized this really, wasn't what I was going to study. So it'd probably be not a great place to go. And the bad news is I was not accepted to Princeton. And I was pretty crushed because that was really my number one. And it was kind of a shock to me because I don't think I'd ever really not gotten anything I wanted. And at the time, I didn't tell anyone. So if any of my high school classmates are watching this, I just told everybody I changed my mind. I just decided I didn't want to go to Princeton after all. And so it was just kind of, I went to West Point on a whim. Like I said all along, I wasn't going to do it, even though Dad really was hoping I would. And then I still remember there was the night that you have to fill out, you had like these little postcards from the different universities. It's not like today where you just go online and say, yes, I'm coming. You had to actually fill it out and mail back this postcard and yes, I'm coming or no, I'm not coming to your college. And they were all had to be postmarked by a certain day. And I had them all on the table. And I remember just looking at them and be like, oh, what the heck? And fill out the West Point. I want to go, here you go, Dad, I'll go to West Point. That was it. So not like the super well thought out decision. I mean, I just kind of like I was an impulsive teenager and that's what I decided to do. I thought it'll be different. Nobody from my high school's done this. So I'll just do it.
Did you have any like preconceived notions about the collegiate experience going in? Like, what did you want out of it?
Well, I'm going to answer maybe not the same question that you just asked. Did I have any preconceived notions? And I'm going to say no. But I had a lot of information. Does that make sense? Like I was still kind of this impulsive teenager. I wasn't really thinking of the future, which I hate to tell you that because I think a lot of kids, that do go to West Point and a lot of my classmates were there for a great moral cause or for a great patriotic expression or to serve their country or all these noble things. And so I always felt like I just kind of like did it just to be different. But my father was a West Point graduate. And so that was sort of my whole life was like West Point, West Point, West Point. My parents went to the Army Navy game every year. We went to, it was a big deal. My parents would socialize with West Point classmates. My dad, of course, had his class ring, and my mom's engagement ring was actually a miniature version of my dad's class ring, which was the way they did it back in those days was it was kind of instead of a diamond ring, you got a miniature of the class ring. So it was a huge part of my growing up. And then my sister, who's 12 years older than me, married a West Point graduate, class of 73. So it was really ingrained in my family. So if anybody should know what to expect upon arrival, it should have been me. Because they did. They sat me down time and time again and tried to tell me what it was. And I don't know where all that information went because it didn't go in my head, until I got to West Point and I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And I was like, oh yeah, they kind of told me about this. So I felt kind of like a ding dong really because, just so many little things, obviously West Point is a military school. And like I told you, and earlier on when you asked me what my childhood was like growing up, and my memory of my dad was all the sort of pomp and circumstance, you know what I mean? Like military parades and, you know, the dress uniforms. And I never really saw him, in my experience, wearing a combat uniform. Like I said, even when he deployed when I was little, I was too little to understand. I mean, daddy went away for a year. That's all I knew, was that daddy went away. And it didn't occur to me that he was possibly, you know, crawling around in mud or, you know, under barbed wire, stepping, you know, avoiding mines or getting shot at. I mean, none of that like really sunk in with me. So then, and again, they told me what it would be like, even the whole, the hazing, the memorization. We had to memorize stuff every day. We had to know, we had to read the newspaper every day, and people could quiz us about the newspaper. What's in the news? What's the sports? What are the scores? We had to memorize the days, which means we had to know how many days until every event, how many days till the next football game, till the next Army-Navy game, to 500th night graduation. I mean, this like whole list of 20 different days. Every day we had to know that. We had to know the menu for the day, what was for breakfast, what was for lunch, for dinner, every single item. I mean, there was so much. We had to memorize Worth's battalion orders, how's the cow, how many gallons are in Lusk Reservoir. I mean, there's so much things. And I remember my dad and brother-in-law sitting me down and trying to give me what's called bugle notes. It's like this little tiny book that has all this information in it. And every year cadets get issued this. And I meant to pull that out and be able to show you, but I forgot, sorry. And they're like, you need to know this. And of course, as a stellar student in high school, I never studied. And so I flipped through the book and was like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar with it. And then I get to West Point and find out that being familiar with it and having it memorized verbatim and being able to say it back at a high rate of speed while shouting are two completely different things. So like when you say, do I have any preconceived notions? I was informed about what it was going to be like, but I guess I just didn't understand what was being told to me. Does that make sense? So yeah. I felt like I kind of went into it blind because it was my own ignorance.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously you mentioned you have a sister that's 15 years older than you. Everyone has a mother.
12 years 12. Older.
Sorry, Aunt Casey. What were the experiences of the other women close to you in terms of going to college?
Well, my mom attended a college called Lady Cliff, which is basically, it's no longer in existence. It basically was a women's college outside of West Point. And my mom often joked around about getting an MRS degree, which was basically the whole point of going to Lady Cliff was to meet a cadet and get married. And I apologize if there are women who actually went and got a real degree, but that was kind of the time. You know, my dad graduated from college in 1950. And my mom was, I think, 2 years younger than he was. So she did drop out of college to get married. And that bothered her my entire childhood. Like, she was determined that her daughters were going to go to college because she dropped out to get married. And again, it was the time. So she was really proactive in kind of pushing me to excel and to do great things, go to a good college. She really pushed from an early age that she wanted me to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, some high profile profession. That's probably one of the reasons I majored in engineering. My sister, 12 years older than me, we didn't really know each other a lot growing up, because if you think, she was 18 and leaving home to move out and go to college on her own when I was 6. So there's kind of a blur there. She also went to Lady Cliff, which was, you know, kind of followed in mom's footsteps. But she didn't stay very long, and I'm not really sure whether it was a semester or a year, or 2 years. I mean, like I said, I was 6, 7, 8 years old at the time, you know, all of a sudden I had to share my bedroom when she came home. And then she chose not to finish college. Like, she said that just wasn't for her. I guess both of the other women in my family did not finish college, so I would have been the first. And I know college was a really big deal to my mom, and she wanted all 4 of her kids to be college graduates, and her first 2 did not graduate from college. And I can remember her crying at the dining room table, and, you know, well, Sean and I knew we kind of had to go to college.
would you tell me about what our day was like? Like, explain to the audience what our day is and what your experience was with it when you arrived as a plebe.
Oh my gosh, our day is reception day. It's the day the new cadets report. So when you walk in as a high school graduate, and by the end of the day, you're marching in a parade as a West Point cadet. It is intense. um, they you start the day. For me, it was in Mikey Stadium, which was a football stadium. Over the years, sometimes it's in different, theatrical arena type places. But we started Mikey Stadium, and so you get there, and we were given a list of things to report with, meaning things to pack to bring with you. And one of them was either black low quarters, which are military shoes, or black penny loafers. So basically, I had to get a pair of penny loafers, which were quite stylish at the time. It was really a preppy was style. So I had a pair of penny loafers that I had worn all through high school, and then we painted them black so that they would be black. Standing in line waiting to turn to get inside the football stadium. So Polish a plaid purse with my monogram on it, with my penny loafers, and I was all stylish. And so you go in and then you sit and they give you a briefing, and it's all very official, and you're kind of this high school, like, okay, here I am. And I'm like, boy, those guys seem kind of stuffy, and they're giving this very quick briefing, like, welcome to cadets and families, blah, 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 blah. They're speaking very quickly. And then they say, and it was just like this whole new timeline is thrust upon you, that 60 seconds, oh my gosh, like nobody, and then what seemed like 3 seconds, they're yelling at you. And so it was like, hug your family, and then they're like, all of a sudden, new cadet, go, move, new cadet, move. And you're just like, you grab your bag and you're running down the stairs of the bleachers, and then they're, directing you and ordering you to go out here, and then on buses. And I remember buses said some skill, yes, put tag on your baggage, put your bags under the bus, get on the bus. And I was like, you said baggage. They keep my purse with me, or should I put it under the bus? And the cadet just repeated the same thing. And you can tell, like, the look on his face, like, what the heck did I just run into? Just new cadet, put a tag on your bags, put your bags under the bus, and get on the bus. And so we went through this. I said, I don't think you understood me. I have a purse, and I'm not sure what to do with my purse. Kind of, almost like my Elwoods goes to West Point. And so eventually, I don't remember what happened, and I think I actually looked him in the eye and said, "You're not being very helpful." And I really have. It's kind of a blur from there. I don't remember if I got yelled at or what, but obviously when I got on the bus and went. And then from there, our day is quite intense. They issue you uniforms. You're taught how to march. You look kind of stupid because they put you in what's called Gym Alpha. It's a uniform. It's got black shorts and a white shirt with a West Point crest on it. But then you're wearing high black knee socks with either your black low quarters or the black penny loafers, and you're marching all over in this stupid outfit. And not only that, what's a little insulting, they safety pin a tag onto you with a string, and it's a checklist of all the places you're supposed to go, and you feel kind of like a dog because they're like checking off where you need to go next. And so you are given this big duffel bag, and you get sent through these supply stations. I think they were in the mess hall, where you just kind of like hold it open, and they're throwing in combat boots and uniforms and different things. And you get your hair cut. And back in the day that I was there, women were not allowed to have long hair. You may have seen pictures of cadets your age, and that is now allowed for women not to cut their hair. But when I was there, women were required to cut their hair. And so as you can see, I have long hair, long curly hair, and I had really long hair in high school, probably more like yours. I had already gotten my hair cut. I hated it, and it was naturally curly, so I had this like little curly hair all over. It didn't matter; they cut my hair again, and so that was kind of like that emotional blow. And then just one thing after another, you're getting yelled at, you're learning to stay in attention, you report to the cadet in the red sash, and you have to do that 5 or 6 times before you get it right. Take your stuff up to your room, learn how to ping, which is you have to like walk at a high rate of speed at attention at all times. You have to square the corner. So like if you are going up the stairs, we would have to hold our arms like at a parallel to the stairs. So if like the stairs are this, you had to hold your arms like this, and then when you hit a straightaway like a landing, you would have to square the corners and go all the way up and then run up. And of course, I was on the 5th or 6th floor, so it was up and down and up and down. And then by the end of the day, they have the acceptance parade where the new cadets actually march in a parade out onto the plane and get accepted into and to take the oath to begin cadet basic training. And usually the parents are there. And turns out my parents were chasing me around all day. And so I do have pictures of me at attention in different places where, parents were running and like, there she is, there she is.
That's so cute.
So yeah, pretty intense.
So I guess that kind of answers my question, but beyond our day itself, what, if anything, shocked you as a plebe throughout your first year at West Point? And overall, what do you think was the hardest adjustment?
Oh, well, so many. First of all, because, and I don't know, yes, what shocked me. I think what shocked me was just being naive myself. Like I said, I didn't really think it through when I just went on a whim. And I think when I was like low crawling in camouflage through mud under barbed wire with a rifle in my hands, that's kind of when it hit me like, what did I get myself into? And I'm sure other people who had really researched the school properly and knew what they were doing weren't as shocked by that. But I think for me, like I said, with my experience, and what I had seen of my dad, it was all more like parades and pageantry kind of thing. Like I didn't really think through the whole combat part. So I just remember being kind of perplexed and wondering how I'd screwed that up and not realized that. I think one of the challenges was being a woman. And of course, women were still a very new thing there. So there was a lot of animosity. Some guys were great and just, like brothers. Other guys were very much, I'll just say jerks, because there's other words that come to mind that I probably don't want to say on your recording, that some of the treatment from some of the guys was horrific. I can remember one classmate in particular who pretty much made it seemed to me, made it his mission to try to run me out. And I know some women dealt with that. There were some companies where that was quite the reputation. So I feel like I was fortunate in that regard. But women being new and the Corps of Cadets trying to adjust to that, there were just certain things that hadn't been figured out yet. Does that make sense? So, and I don't even know what the right answer is. So, for example, the fact that there were only about 10% women, then you have to stop and think about, okay, how do you put the women into the Corps of Cadets? Do you have a company that's all women and the women are together, or do you spread them out? And the answer was they spread them out. Well, that meant that we really didn't have each other's back. Does that make sense? So in my squad, I was the only woman. My roommate was in a different squad, so we roomed with another woman. But even when it came to what time we had to be at formation, what we were going to do that day, who was yelling, we had 2 different squad leaders coming into our room, and typically roommates would have one squad leader. Both roommates would be in the same squad. If the squad leader came in and gave directions, you would only have to jump up to attention one time. We had to do that double. There were rules during the academic, well, all the time, but it was really more of an issue during the academic year. If you had 2 different genders in the same room, you had to keep the door open 90 degrees. Well, you think about the interruptions. So if you think about, like, if you and a classmate just get together and you close the door and you need to study for a test, then you have that privacy to have a quiet environment and not be interrupted. But as a woman, there was no one I could study with without having to have the door open. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there, again, most people were reasonable, but there were some classmates or upper class or lower class who were set that they were going to catch you in a rule. And I even had somebody yell at me once for my door being 89 degrees instead of 90 degrees. I mean, we're just looking at ridiculous things. I had somebody write me up once for being in bed with a guy. So I don't know if you've ever seen a cadet room, but it's very basic. It's an army barracks, so we were only allowed 2 knickknacks on our on our desk. Now think about your dorm desk. Think about all the cute decor. You and I shopped forever to make sure you had wall hangings and cute decor for your bed and pillows and that little plant and some pictures and so many cute things. As a cadet, we were allowed 2 things on our desk, 2 knickknacks. And the largest thing allowed was an 8x10 photo and then one other item. So you have a very basic, and then you have your bed, which is of course made to military precision. You could bounce a quarter off it. So then when someone would come to study with you, it was you and your roommate. You each had a desk and you each had a chair for your desk, right? And then there were 2 beds. There were no other chairs. It wasn't like in a dorm where you're like, oh, I want to have, remember you had a little stool so that if you had people come over, you had this like little footstool kind of thing, or sometimes people get beanbag chairs or whatever. There was nothing like that. The only place to sit was on the chair that was provided for the desk or the bed. So I had a classmate come in and we were studying and we were trying to look at the same set of notes. And so we sat down beside each other on the bed, fully clothed, looking at a textbook together. And the guy I told you who made it his mission to try to run me out, he walks by and he starts yelling, you're not supposed to be in bed, and then he actually did physically write me up and submit it to the TAC officer that I was caught in bed with a guy. We were looking at a textbook because we had a big test the next day. And I think I was upset and I think I was scared I was going to fail the test. So I think the guy was trying to like pep talk me, if I remember. So I don't even remember what your original question was. So, so go ahead. Let's see if there was anything else I needed to add.
What shocked you going through your year and your time at West Point, and what was the hardest adjustment? But I actually, if you want to revisit that, that's fine. But I kind of want to springboard off of what you said most recently and dig a little deeper into some things. How, as someone who identifies as a woman at the time, how did you feel like your femininity was taken away from you, or that you were somewhere in between? I know that other West Point women have remarked, having gone through the academy around the same time as you, that there were men, there were women, civilian women, and then there were something in between, which was what you guys were at West Point. That kind of was how it felt. And I was wondering if you could speak to that at all, in terms of like having had to cut your hair and, not really even being able to form these relationships with guys without being under scrutiny.
It was hard. I tell you what, because we were expected to act like guys. And it goes through so many levels that, and I'll talk to you just a little bit. Remember I told you we had a list of things we were supposed to bring. I talked about the black penny loafers, and we had to bring our own underwear and our own bras. And I remember my mom making a big deal about getting me some panties that had lace on them. And I remember rolling my eyes, as teenagers do. I'm sure you're familiar with this concept. And thinking, what does it matter, Mom? She's like, I just want you to remember that you're a girl. And I was like, at the time, this was before I even went, and I thought, I'm a girl, what's the problem? She's like, just hear me out. I want your underwear to be a little bit lacy. And looking back on that, she had a lot of wisdom, because basically our laundry all got washed together. So basically everything turned gray. So this pretty white lacy underwear ended up some shade of gray eventually. The lace fell off, all of that. The songs, the core, the alma mater, they were all designed and written for when the cadet student body was all male. So as a soprano, trying to sing some of these things, there were times when I would just mouth the words because I could not hit those low notes. And then there were times that I would intentionally drop and sing an octave lower just to fit in, because when you are singing the national anthem, or even when you're singing a cadence right? When you're running, you don't want to be, and then you stick out. So we tried to change our voices and sound like guys. We did have to cut our hair, and it was not attractive. We weren't allowed to wear makeup, or if we did, it had to be very, very light. We could not paint our fingernails. We were not allowed to wear earrings. I think it was my junior or senior year when the earring rule changed, and that was huge, huge, because most of us had pierced ears before and had come close to closing up. And then we were allowed like a pearl or a gold. It had to be a spherical shape, a little ball, no bigger than, and there was an actual measurement. I mean, it was all specified. But that you couldn't wear that, in camouflage. But in certain dress uniforms, you could then start wearing earrings. Relationships were hard. Guys were not nice, a lot of them. They made fun of women cadets for being fat. Hudson Hippo Hips was what we were called all the time. Hudson River is where the West Point is on the Hudson River, so we were called hippos, and we were told we had Hudson Hippo Hips. There was a little pizza place in the area where you could go like after dinner. It was the only option we had because cadets are not allowed to leave base or campus or post, depending on what service you're talking about. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. So the only place we could go for a snack that was within our academic limits was this little pizza place, and calzones were very popular. So everybody would go like at night and get a calzone. Well, the joke was that, I just saw this fat female cadet in there getting a calzone and a Diet Coke. Like, the Diet Coke's going to do anything for you. Maybe you should give up the calzone. Have you been on a scale lately? This is the environment I lived with all the time. We were told we were fat. We were told we were ugly. And I believed it. For a long time. I tried not to walk like a man. We had to carry our books differently. Let's see. So in high school, here's a notebook of some sort. In high school, I would carry my books, I don't know if you can see, like this, right? And that's kind of a typical girl thing to do. We were made fun of. Couldn't do that. Guys carry their books down like this, right? And so, like, when we were going to class, sometimes you'd have 5, 6 books, so your arm would be out to here, and you would have to stack these horizontal books. We had to learn how to do that so we could fit in, so we wouldn't be made fun of. We had to be in uniform 24/7. We were never allowed. So if we were going out on a Saturday night, if we had some free time, again, we couldn't go very many places. So as plebes, you were limited. We had Eisenhower Hall, which was like the big social place. But to avoid fraternization, because plebes and upperclassmen are not allowed to be friends, okay, or date. So plebes were allowed to go there till a certain time, and then after that time, I think it was 8:30, we had to leave and go to Cullum Hall, which was plebes only. And all you could get at Cullum Hall was like ice cream. The beer was at Ike Hall. And back in my age, we were allowed to drink at 18. So drinking was part of our college experience, and it was legal and everything. But we were in uniform. And so a lot of the local colleges would bring buses of women in, dressed up, makeup, hair, plunging, cleavage, short, tight dresses, high heels, dressed up quite nicely. And so the guys were always trying to hit on those girls and treat us like crap, So it was really, I still remember, public display of affection was not allowed. So you could not hold hands with anybody. You could not be seen too close to a guy. And I remember after I graduated, I went to my officer basic course, and I had a boyfriend there. I was at the engineer school. And, he knew I was kind of insecure about a lot of things. And so I remember taking him back. At the time, my mom lived near West Point, so I took him home for one weekend, and we went to a football game. And I still distinctly remember him. First of all, I walked around campus, or on, I'll call it campus because that's the word holding hands with him. And I just felt like a badass. Like, here I am on West Point, holding hands with a guy. Who's going to stop me? But he said to me, he goes, I don't understand what you've told me. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, these girls are hot. They're all pretty. They're in great shape. He goes, I don't understand what's wrong with all these cadets because these girls are good looking. He didn't say hot because that wasn't, I don't remember what he said, but whatever he said, it was what you would call hot. And I just remember being shocked that this guy, you know, could see that on campus. And like I said, we were taught or told over and over that we were ugly. And I probably 10, 15, 20 years believed it. You know what I mean? Like I really felt like I was not feminine. I tried not to walk feminine. I tried not to act feminine. When I was at summer training at Camp Buckner, we have a thing called Infantry Week, and it's very difficult. It's basically 7 days of, you know, doing infantry tactics, you know, patrols, and we had a night where we have what's called the survival dinner. And so basically they give us a rabbit and a chicken and a can and something to make a fire with. And it's up to us to make our own dinner and go forage berries or whatever. So, you know, and they taught us how to kill the animals, you know, and the bunny, you have to like pet it and calm it down because it makes and then whack it over the head with a stick. And I distinctly remember the guys in my squad being like, Erin will do it. And of course, remember, there's only one girl per squad. And it was probably the most intense peer pressure. And to be honest, I think the guys just didn't want to do it. And they were too scared they didn't want to be made fun of by their peers. But I got put in that position to where I had to do it because otherwise then they would be able to say, oh yeah, she's a girl, she's weak. So we always had to think about that. Like we couldn't be weak. We had to be extra strong. And I still to this day want to apologize to the rabbit because it's probably not an easy end, you know, because I couldn't aim very well when I was whacking it with the stick. It was awful, but it was delicious.
Oh no.
So anyway, great experience, but yeah, there was a lot of difficulty being early days.
Was there female solidarity between you guys?
Yes and no. I think there was probably a desire for solidarity, and it's interesting now. I'm, you know, in a Facebook group called West Point Women, and you know, I'm very semi-close with a lot of my classmates. In just a couple weeks, I'm gonna go meet up with some of the women. We call ourselves the Chicks of '86. I think there's a lot more of that now, like that we're older and wiser. Looking back, we think, what the heck? Why were we all so isolated? It was the system isolated us on purpose. And I think I'm going to assume that the motives were good. Like I said, because if you have just a very small population of women, if you put all the women together, then you create a situation where certain regiments or companies or, you know, battalions are proud of the fact that they have no women. And they're like, oh, yeah, we don't have any women. So I guess it was right to spread us out, but I felt like it isolated us more. We didn't really have that network. And I think, so we really weren't there for each other. And it was kind of just a survival. Does that make sense? Like, I think we were there for each other, but we just never let each other know it. So we weren't there for each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
how would you describe, like, generally the campus culture at West Point?
I would say it's very positive. And I, you know, I that probably sounds strange because I've just been telling a lot of negative stories, but what I didn't realize back then, and this is going to sound like I'm bragging, was what exceptional people I was surrounded by. You know what I mean? Like, I just went to college, you know what I mean? Like, I just showed up, and it never occurred to me that the general population wasn't just like my peers. Does that make sense? So when you think about it, there is no skipping class, ever. It's just not allowed. There's no being tardy to class, ever. It's just not allowed. You know what I mean? So a lot of that is my mindset. There is no lying. There is no leaving out truths so that it's, you know, to give the impression of not lying. The honor code, a cadet will not lie, cheat, nor steal, nor tolerate those who do. Like, it is not allowed, to the point to where If you put $1 in a vending machine and it gives you your dollar back and the pop, you couldn't take them because you would be cheating the machine. When we did our homework, we had to put an honesty statement or an honor statement on every single assignment that told the professor who helped us. So let's say I was doing calculus and I didn't understand. I would have to give a very detailed statement of, on problem 3, Kelsey Batt helped me figure out that such and such, you know what I mean? You gave a very detailed statement on every single assignment to say if you got help with it or not. So when you put all that together, choose the harder right over the easier wrong. Will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. Will not be late. Will not skip things that you don't want to go to. I mean, it's an environment of excellence that is made today, and so one of the things you had mentioned, I don't know if you asked me this before, was part of adjustment coming out of the point is I expect everybody to hold themselves to those same standards, and that's hard. I mean, that's hard for me 30 plus years later. I'm a teacher. I've even had parents. I mean, parents love me. I mean, kids don't love me because I am tough on them. Say, oh, you're that strict military teacher, right? And that still perplexes me because I don't think I'm strict. I just have rules and all rules. And that just doesn't seem to me to be strict. To me, that's just a way of life. If you do the right thing, you do the right thing. You don't think about it, maybe do something else because it's just inconvenient to do the right thing now. You do the right thing. And so that's culture.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, that is the culture. I mean, in spite of all the, I told you it was tough being a woman, but I am definitely proud to be a graduate. And it kind of hits me more and more the older I get, how amazing some of my classmates really are.
Yeah.
How amazing some of my, cadets before me and cadets after me are. We're talking about some amazing people who do fantastic things, who hold themselves to a very high standard.
What are some of your classmates up to now that you're aware of?
Oh my gosh. They're all over the government. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, you name it, they're all up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of, and even, there's some that are still serving as generals. There are those that are actually in the government, in the national government. There are CEOs, pretty much still leading. And I think that that's one of the things that is really key is that, yes, there's the service obligation to serve in the Army after graduation, but the bottom line is that all of my classmates are still serving. I teach. I'm serving the students and the parents in our school district, and I take that very seriously. And I mean, you've seen me work crazy hours because I'm dedicated, but that's no different than any of my classmates. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely.
Like, there's other ways to serve, and people are still serving.
That's really cool. I guess one of the other questions I wanted to ask was, did you have any notable relationships with any of the fellow cadets?
So you're asking me about boyfriends?
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't really date a lot younger. And I think some of that was, again, that whole insecurity. But I did have a boyfriend senior year. I'm not sure if it was junior year too, so long ago. We did end up becoming engaged. And obviously we're no longer together, which is to your benefit, of course.
That might not be so obvious, though. So this is a fiance that you broke off the engagement with that isn't my father and isn't your husband.
Right.
So who is this guy? Like, what happened?
How do I say it? I don't want to paint him in a totally negative light because obviously I was in love with him at one point and thought I would spend the rest of my life with him. But sort of the first chink in the relationship was he was very jealous of my accomplishments. And things are different at West Point now, but at the time when we were there, you would serve in a position in the summer between junior and senior year. You would either work at Beast Barracks or Camp Frederick or that's not it. It's not Camp Frederick. Anyway, wherever the yearlings go, all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank. Cadet field training.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would have a leadership role there. And he really wanted to be a squad leader. So I must have been together with him junior year because this kind of went in the summer. So he wanted to be a squad leader, which was a cadet sergeant. And I was a regimental something or other. I don't remember what it was, but I was a cadet officer. And so I outranked him in the summer. And he didn't really worry. He's like, well, I don't really worry about that because, you outranking me because once we start school year, then, it'll change. And so typically then during first semester and second semester, often what would happen was if somebody was an officer one semester, they might be a sergeant the next semester or switch. And so I was a platoon leader, I believe. It's all so long ago. So I outranked him first semester. And that bothered him. But he was like, oh, well, it's no big deal. Next semester I'll outrank you. And he figured it would balance out. Well, the next semester I still outranked him. And that bothered him. And he actually did ask me to go resign my commission or to ask for a different job. He did ask me to. And I was like, are you crazy? I'm not going to do that. This is the job I was assigned by our TAC officer. Why should I ask for a different job because your ego is hurt? And so we had some difficulty there, but I stayed with him. And of course, my girlfriends thought I was nuts. They're like, why didn't you just dump him? And then, we did end up getting engaged after that. And then it kind of just boiled down to one weekend when we were able to leave campus and I wanted to go visit my sister in Massachusetts and her husband, and he wanted to go visit some friends of his in Washington, D.C. And we were going to go to one or the other. And he was throwing a real fit that he did not want to go see my sister. He wanted to go see his friends, and these were friends of his family. So friends his parents' age that were like an uncle or an aunt to him. And we were getting ready to go to the Washington, D.C. area after graduation because that's where the engineer basic course was. We were both going to be engineers, and so we were going to be in the Washington, D.C. area for like 4 months. And so I said, well, we're going to be there. We can see these people all the time, but this is my last chance to be anywhere near my sister. And he threw a fit. And finally, I was just like, that's it. I don't know, like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so it was just, I don't know. So then we broke up and, we stayed friends for a while because we were stationed together because we were planning to get married. So, and that's another thing. When you are in a relationship with another cadet, and you want to be stationed together, you have to declare that. So the way it worked back then is everything went by class rank. So when you, and I think it's still this way, but when you get your branch, which I was going to be Engineer Corps, or Infantry is another branch, Signal Corps, Military Intelligence, if you don't know, those are the kind of branches. Armor, which drives tanks, artillery, shoots, rockets and things. You select the one you want, and it's basically you get your selection based on class rank. So it's tough to be an engineer because that's you have to be at the top of the class for that. So I did get engineer, and he did too. And then from there to get your actual assignment, it goes by class rank. So basically, you walk into a big auditorium, and you have all the list of there's a spot in Hawaii, there's a spot in Italy, there's 5 spots in Fort Carson, Colorado, and one by one you start with whoever's top class rank, and they get their choice. Now that one's off the list, and it would go down. Well, I was ahead of my fiance in class rank, so in order for us to get stationed together, I had to give up my spot, and then whatever was still available when he came up was what we would get. And we had talked about all along we were going to go to Europe. We were going to go to Europe. We were going to go to Europe, and then I don't know, somewhere in the last couple of weeks before we actually did it, we decided, we're going to be newlyweds. Maybe it'd be better if we stayed in the United States. So we ended up both picking Fort Lewis, Washington, to stay closer to family. And so, And I bought off and I had a great time at Fort Lewis, don't get me wrong, but basically I gave up living in Europe for a guy, and don't ever do that.
No. Well, luckily, spoiler alert, you did end up going to Europe, and that's how you met your other guy, final guy. So, hooray for that.
I don't know if I ever told you when I met your dad, it was over in Italy, and he had been stationed there a long time before I got there. And so we only were together for a couple of months, and he strongly hinted, we'll just say, that he wanted me to follow him back to the States and get married. And I basically told him no. I said, no, I gave up Europe for a guy once. I'm not doing it again. And so if you still want me after I get done living in Europe for 3 years, then we'll discuss it. But I'm not giving up Europe for a guy again.
Yeah.
So, and here you
are. Last question. How would you describe yourself after West Point?
Well, that's kind of a hard question, because are you meaning like right away after graduation, or just like my whole 35 plus or more year? I haven't stopped to do the math here. Like, are you looking at the whole time period, or like right away a window after graduation? What is it you're hoping to hear about?
I mean, I guess it's more so think about the question and what you want to say about it, because, you know, when you're thinking about describing yourself after something like this specific and unique experience, immediately after, I'm sure you were changed. And I'm sure, I mean, I know personally that your relationship with West Point over the past 35 years has changed significantly in terms of how you view it. But I guess ultimately, how did it affect you, as you'd already touched on? What did you take away, and who are you now because of it?
Well, I think West Point did change me. Remember I told you when I went, I was kind of the giggly girl in the preppy outfit. Just like spur of the moment, oh, I think I'll just go to West Point. And while there, I think I gained a whole new sense of self-discipline, holding myself to high standards. I never really had to try in high school. It was easy. And this is a side story, but I remember thinking the night before tests were awesome. I never even had to take a textbook home because it was a test. I don't think I ever studied for a test in high school ever, and aced them all. So I really don't think I had that much of a work ethic. I don't know. I think I had a lot of accomplishments, but I don't know that I really feel like I earned them. And I think when I went to West Point, I learned so much. And some of the things that we do at West Point, other people think are weird. Like, you know, we would have to, as a plebe, you would have to cut the cake into perfect slices, or, you know, deliver laundry or memorize all these things. And to a person who hasn't gone through it, it may seem random, but it also instills in you the fact that if you have a job, you do it well, and that you hold yourself to a high standard. And one of the things that we're taught to say from an early on, well, the first day, is no excuse. You didn't do something you were supposed to do. You don't start offering excuses, you say no excuse. And so it's a whole different approach. You think about the honor code, the holding yourself to high standards. I think that's what I got out of it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm possibly a little bit more serious about things now. I throw myself into things wholeheartedly. I have high expectations of the people around me as well. And in some ways, that almost makes it more difficult to relate to people, because sometimes people think that I'm the weird, strict military one. Does that make sense? And I don't see that at all. I still have a loving heart just like anybody else. I just think that if something's the right thing to do, you do it. So I guess that's kind of the takeaway there. Now, as far as my relationship with the academy, it's ebbed and flowed. I think I really tried hard to fit in as an officer in the Army, and I know that there is some animosity out there from people who go to ROTC or OCS thinking that West Pointers think we're all that because we have an attitude. So I tried really hard not to be that way. I very rarely wear my class ring for that reason, because I didn't want to be called a ring knocker, and I wanted to fit in and maybe smooth that gap, let people think, okay, I'm really a nice, normal person, not what they had built up. It's almost like you think about a school rivalry. Like, there's, two rivals, there's a lot of animosity, but this really doesn't have any founding to it.
Mhm.
There was something else I was going to tell you, but I've kind of forgotten it. Oh, our class motto. Interesting you should ask this, because it just really struck me yesterday. Every class at West Point has a motto, and you come up with it during the summer plebe year, and then everybody votes on it. And ours is courage never quits, 86. So there's usually sort of a rhyming component. And so now that's kind of abbreviated. Whenever any of my classmates post on Facebook, they say CNQ, which stands for Courage Never Quits. And that's really kind of, I guess, the story of my life. You don't give up. You keep trying. If you're facing adversity, you find a different way. You may not do something the way you thought. So sometimes not quitting doesn't mean doing exactly the thing you're setting out. Maybe you do something different, but you don't give up. You keep going. And that's a big part of me. Duty, honor, country, the West Point motto. I mean, duty, honor, country, courage never quits. These are things I live by,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing this with me and with us in general. I think your story is incredibly valuable, and I'm happy that we can have a living recorded history of it now. I'm gonna hit the stop recording button if you have anything else that you want to say.
I love you.
Love you too. Now, 3, 2, 1.